behalf of the city and my colleagues, I'd like to welcome you all to the Mayor's 2012 Budget Address. As our first order of business, I would ask that you please rise for the presentation of the colors by the St. Paul Police Color Guard and the Local 21 Color Guard.
Detail, unpaged, food. Detail. Roll. Left. Hey. Present. Four.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order. Four. Right. Hey. Forward. Four.
Please be seated. As president of the St. Paul City Council, it is my honor to be able to introduce Mayor Chris Coleman. Today, the mayor gives highlights of an extremely complicated budget, one in which many people have had a hand in developing. The mayor's staff, the Office of Financial Services, and the department and office directors have been working diligently to produce the budget we will see today. The process of developing and reviewing a budget for the city continues to be one of the most important functions of the mayor and the city council. And as all of us have learned over the years, the great needs of our city always outweigh the limited resources available. As I reflect on the start of this year's budget review, I can't help but think about the challenge of the task that is before us. As the state and federal government continue to cut resources to the city, we are again faced with the unenviable task of making extraordinarily difficult choices to balance our budget. It seems that these decisions get more and more demanding and the solutions more complex each year. Despite losing $15.6 million of state aid in our 2011 budget and another $12 million for 2012, the City of St. Paul has risen to the challenge and found a way to balance our books and continue to provide essential services to our residents. Until about 6 months ago, most people knew very little about debt ceilings and bond ratings or their importance in the financial health of an entity. The only people who seemed to pay attention, other than bond rating agency, were those of us on the inside of the process. Approval for selling our bonds at low rates, maintaining our stellar bond ratings, has become perfunctory at the city. This achievement should not go unnoticed because, as you all know, this is an accomplishment for which the federal government and the state of Minnesota can no longer boast. I don't want you to think that because the city has weathered this loss in resources and kept our financial house in order, that this has occurred with ease and without serious consequences for the city. Some core services have been significantly reduced. Investments in the future health of our city have been delayed or tabled indefinitely. And we have been forced to ask more of our residents in fees and property taxes to make up just a very small part of the cuts we have received. Real sacrifices have been made and real discipline has been employed to keep us on a stable financial track. The course of action we embark on today is designed to help us prioritize the most pressing needs of the city and thoughtfully direct our assets to address them. Our mission is to craft a budget for the city which is prudent and economical, but reflects the shared values of St. Paul residents. This is no small task, and one which I know we will all struggle with as we chart a course for 2012 in the next several months. We start today by hearing the mayor's proposal. So without further delay, it is my honor to introduce Mayor Chris Coleman.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know a few of you were lured under the false pretenses that the liquor license had arrived for the Amsterdam. Wanted to go to a budget speech at a bar, not necessarily the budget speech part of it. But in just a couple of weeks, you'll all be able to come back, hear some great music, and actually get a drink in this wonderful new venue. Today we gather to present the proposed budget for 2012. We come together at a time of great angst about financial stability throughout the state, the country, and in fact the entire world. In an unprecedented period of the use of the word unprecedented, we have unprecedented shutdown of state government, an unprecedented game of brinksmanship over the national debt ceiling, unprecedented market fluctuations on Wall Street, and an unprecedented downgrading of the United States credit rating. Everyone is looking for some good news, some sign that there is some place that knows how to manage its finances properly. I believe you need to look no further than the city of St. Paul. With the leadership of the City Council, Council President Lantry, our finance team, our department directors, and all of our great public servants and city employees, St. Paul is an example for all that budgeting doesn't have to be a roller coaster ride nor an exercise in bad behavior. This isn't because things have been easy. In fact, they've been as difficult this year as any year in the past. With nearly a $16 million cut to local government aid handed down almost 2/3 of the way through the year, we've had to be nimble, smart, and hardworking. But because we've done the work over the last several years to achieve and maintain structural balance, the blow of the cuts to local government aid, while painful, can be handled without diminishing public safety, without significant service disruptions, and with no turning back on the progress we have made in the city of St. Paul. Nowhere is that progress more evident than in this room. There are two sounds I love, hammer and guitars, and hammers making sweet music, creating a new venue in the city of St. Paul. I know that the Amsterdam will quickly become known as the premier music room in the Midwest. I really appreciate the fact that John and Jared Coleman have allowed us to show up just a little bit early for the party. Kind of like those bad guests that show up a half hour when things aren't quite clean. We are here, but we can see the future of this great room. They join Joe Firth, owner of Eclipse Records, and Pete Fetch and Jeff Johnson, owners of Big Table Studio Poster Shop, in revitalizing Wabasha Street and turning this block into a destination unto itself. Let's all give John, Jarrett, Joe, Pete, and Jeff a loud welcome to downtown St. Paul. The 2012 budget I present today continues the work of the last several years. It prioritizes public safety, emphasizes our work surrounding education, and moves our city forward with smart investments in critical infrastructure. But before we could get to the 2012 budget, we also had to deal with the $15.6 million hole blown in the city's budget by the state legislature. Repeatedly, cities across the state of Minnesota have warned the legislature that continued erosion of local aid doesn't prevent tax increases. It only increases the burden to property owners, placing particular harm on homeowners on fixed incomes and small business owners. Shifting the state's challenges onto the backs of our cities doesn't erase our need to put police officers and firefighters on the street. I was proud to have stood with our officers at the state capitol this year, trying to explain to the legislators what we do at the city. Unfortunately, they did not listen, nor did the legislative leadership avail themselves of offers to come to our city and look at the work that we've done over the years to strengthen our community, balance our budget, and put the city on sound financial footing. Last year, I proposed, and the City Council adopted, a 0% increase in the levy. But I also warned that it was only possible if the state fulfilled its commitment to the partnership between state government and cities throughout Minnesota. We explained that every dollar cut in local aid results in 50 cents of service reduction and 50 cents of property tax increases. We showed that the city of St. Paul contributes far more to the state's bottom line than it receives in return. we send $240 million of revenue to the state through property taxes and sales taxes alone. In exchange, we were scheduled to receive a mere $63 million back in local aid. Despite all these efforts to educate the legislature, we saw a continued pattern that was begun in 2003 of the state pushing its problems down to the backs of local taxpayers. Perhaps I should take comfort in the fact that it could have been worse. While a $15.6 million cut for 2011 and an additional $12 million cut in state aid for 2012 is deeply painful, the original budget passed by the legislature would have cut over $28 million in 2011 and eventually eliminated local aid for the cities of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Duluth. This mean-spirited proposal neither served the interests of our cities nor our state, nor did it serve the interests of our children, our families, our small business owners trying to scratch out a living in a very difficult economy. Rather, it served the narrow interests of the most partisan few who do not understand that you cannot have a strong Minnesota unless its three largest cities are strong and vital. Wisely, the governor vetoed that bill. That it could have been worse doesn't give me a lot of comfort. What does allow me peace of mind is the smart fiscal management of our city. Under the leadership of our financial services team, we have braced for the 2011 cut, held the line on spending, looked for opportunities to obtain one-time infusions of additional revenue, and followed the fund balance policy wisely adopted by the council several years ago. Thus, to counter the impact of the state cut in 2011, we'll use several strategies. First, nearly $3.5 million in savings will be reached by carefully managing staff vacancies in each of our departments. Second, we'll use $2.1 million received from refinancing the Riverfront Tax Increment District. Third, nearly $1 million in authorized contingency for 2011 will not be spent. And finally, we will use $5.3 million from the fund balance to close the gap for 2011. However, this use of fund balance will be done pursuant to fund balance policy and consistent with smart financial practices. I want to thank Todd Hurley, our Director of the Office of Financial Services, and Scott Cordes and the entire staff at OFS for their extremely disciplined approach to balancing a budget that has protected us from much more damage from a very significant storm. Let's give them a round of applause. I also want to pause just a minute to thank someone who has been a real partner in keeping the city financially strong. The council and I have always enjoyed a strong partnership, but there was one member that I could always count on to ask the tough questions about the budget, Councilmember Pat Harris. Many of you know that Pat has chosen not to run for re-election. His voice on the council will be missed, in addition to all the incredible work that he does in the community, which I know will go on. Because this is the last budget speech that Pat will be forced to sit through, I think maybe we should all just spend a second and recognize and thank Pat for his incredible service to the city of St. Paul. I also want to thank him for getting me a ride on an F-16 last week, but that's another story. As recent economic news makes clear, we're at an increasingly dangerous place in our history. The greatest concern centers on a seeming unwillingness to compromise or even consider another point of view. Our system of government is built upon the inherent tension among conflicting ideas, but it's also built upon a willingness to come together for the common good. Whether bringing the state to shutdown or bringing the federal government to the brink of financial disaster, the rank partisanship and the acrimony in this country have shaken the conference of Americans in our ability to solve the most basic problems, let alone the most difficult. Sometimes I think it has less to do with philosophical differences and more to do with the fact that we don't even understand what the other person is saying. Since we're in a music venue, a music analogy is appropriate perhaps. The other day, my son was playing a new kind of slowed down version of Elton John's song, Benny and the Jets, which, by the way, you'll be able to get on vinyl right next door. So I realized I'd been listening to the song for a million years, thinking I knew the words to the song, and I realized that the only words I really knew were electric boots, mohair suit, read it in a magazine. I was missing some really great words and great phrases, like there's a phrase in there where we fight out our parents out in the street to see who's right or who's wrong. My son loved that line. It took a new artist and a new perspective to slow it down and help me understand what I thought I understood all of these years. Maybe we all need to slow down the music. Stop pretending that we know what song is being sung and actually listen to the words. When we've done that in the past in this country, we've accomplished some pretty amazing things. 76 years ago, when our country was rattled by the greatest economic crisis in history, thousands of senior citizens were living in destitution. At that time, Social Security was born and lifted millions out of poverty. Nearly 50 years ago, Americans confronted the ugliness of continued discrimination, subjugation, and segregation of African Americans, and landmark civil rights legislation was signed into law. And in 1971, Minnesotans, facing soaring property taxes and an imbalance in the public education system, found a better way to equitably fund services throughout the state of Minnesota. The resulting partnership was dubbed the Minnesota Miracle. We may be in short supply of miracles lately, but wouldn't it be something if we just slowed down the bickering, lessened the bitterness, and started working together for the good of our country and of our state? We don't always agree on everything in the city of St. Paul, but we do agree on one thing. This is a great city, getting even better. But it won't get better if public safety is diminished. It won't improve if we don't invest in our future. And it will never realize its full potential unless all of our children are prepared to realize their full potential. It's upon this understanding that the 2012 budget is based. This budget maintains our strength of force in the police department and fire department. While the police department budget is reduced, we will maintain an authorized force of 610 officers. The 24 new officers that were sworn in last week will continue serving the residents of the city of St. Paul. While several civilian positions will be eliminated, the budget depends primarily on the wise leadership of Chief Smith and his team to manage vacancies and reduce costs in a way that do not reduce the department's ability to respond to any situation. Under Chief Butler's wise leadership, our fire department continues to be among the best in the country. Fast EMS response times continue to offer the best chance of survival for anyone facing a life-threatening situation. The department budget will be reduced primarily through reductions in overtime, but the confidence and support that St. Paulites have in their fire department will continue to be well placed. The important third leg of public safety is the work of our city attorneys. It's critical that we build upon the nationally recognized work of Sarah Grewing and her staff on domestic violence and public safety. Any reductions to the office's budget would threaten that work. Therefore, we will maintain the current staffing levels in 2012, allowing us to continue that work of the Joint Prosecution Unit with the County Attorney's Office, as well as our community prosecutors. In recent years, the role that the city has played in education has been reshaped. Our work is gaining national recognition. Several months ago, I was out in Washington, D.C., and I was at an event, and this woman came racing across the hall, and she reached out her hand, and she shook it, and she said, "I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm the assistant to Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan." Then she kind of got this sheepish look, and she looked down, and she said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I don't remember your name, and I don't really remember what city you're from, but you guys are doing great work on education." So I'll take that. At least we're on the radar. From the work around the Promised Neighborhoods to the network of out-of-school time learning opportunities through Sprockets, We recognize that every department can play a part in the education work. But the two most critical partners in these efforts are the Parks Department, led by Mike Hom, and the Public Library System, led by Kit Hadley. While both departments will see cuts, their work will not be slowed. In libraries, there will be a system-wide reduction of 50 hours. However, no library will be closed. And in fact, we'll move forward with critical upgrades at Sunray and Highland Park libraries. In parks, through a creative partnership with Public Works, costs of several areas of work currently paid for out of the general fund will be transferred to the right-of-way budget. This will allow us to minimize service reductions in the system. It's made possible because of the spirit of teamwork that our department directors have embraced. I want to particularly thank Rich Lallier, our Public Works Director, for his willingness to step up and help out in every way possible. He set a great example for us all. Thank you, Rich. The budget I propose for 2012 will also allow us to move forward on several key investments. On the east side, we'll break ground on the Payne, Maryland Joint Library and Parks facility that will bring a first-class center to the children and families of that neighborhood. A lot of people question why we make these types of investments in such difficult times. In yesterday's New York Times, there was an article connecting some of the violence that we saw recently in London to some of the cuts that were made to the police department, the libraries, and other centers where children gather. There's no excuse for criminal behavior, and it cannot be tolerated. But we also have to be mindful of the strategies and the investments that we can make to try to prevent such incidents from happening in the future. And that's what we're doing in the city of St. Paul. A particular interest to many, maybe not this month, but in a few months, will be the replacement of our snowplow fleet. It'll be more fuel efficient. You can clap for that. That's a good thing. It will be more fuel efficient, more effective at removing snow, and able to serve multiple roles. These trucks will also allow us to more accurately determine which streets have been cleared and which ones we were unable to get down because of something blocking the street. Last December, we saw that all too often, and too many streets went unplowed for too long because we were simply unable to track where we had been. Anything that we can do to clean up after snowmageddons, such as we saw last fall, will help us and help the residents, and the latest technology will greatly aid these efforts. Also, in the middle of that great snowstorm last December, our email system broke down, making a difficult job even tougher. We have to have reliable email service when dealing with major snowfalls and other emergencies. Through a shared services partnership with the state of Minnesota, in 2012, we will have 24/7 maintenance and support coverage, providing St. Paul with a communication system we can rely on when we need it. On another front, we'll install new parking meters in downtown, making doing business downtown just a little bit more convenient. This has been a priority of the St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce and business owners downtown, not to mention everyone who has lunch at the grill and parks in Rice Park. It will make a huge difference for people coming into downtown St. Paul and will make it that much more friendlier and much more accessible. In our Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Department, we'll add a position to better monitor citywide contract compliance. In our Planning and Economic Development Department, we'll continue to pursue every opportunity to maximize development along the Central Corridor and across the city of St. Paul. In addition to completing the Farmers Market Flats, we'll move forward on the Penfield and the Lunds Byerly's grocery store in downtown St. Paul. We will, despite the setback at this year's during this year's legislative process, we will renew and redouble our efforts to build the regional ballpark in downtown St. Paul. Finally, we'll continue to build the vitality of the city of St. Paul, whether through great new venues like the Amsterdam or expanding successes like next month's Concrete and Grass Festival, the Jazz Festival, or Thursday nights in downtown filled with great music in Mears Park and dancing in Rice Park. St. Paul is and will continue to be the place to go for great entertainment. The challenge of moving St. Paul forward in the face of continued cuts from the state and federal government is not easy. It is, however, necessary. To do that, we cannot, as some would suggest, take an all-cuts approach to the task. Simply reacting to cuts to local government aid by taking an axe to city services would imperil public safety and our education initiatives, while making this place we proudly call home hard to recognize. I'm extremely mindful of the impacts of property taxes to our residents and our businesses. That's why last year we did adopt a 0% increase in the levy. It's why I've stood with mayors across the state of Minnesota to oppose further cuts to local government aid. And but for that $15.6 million cut in local government aid and the $12 million cut next year, I am confident that I would be standing before you today proposing a 0% increase in the levy. Unfortunately, that is not the case. In total, the 2012 budget will see $6.2 million in cuts. However, I will also propose a 6.5% increase in the levy in order to preserve critical services in light of the significant cuts in state aid. I also will propose using non-property tax revenues in order to minimize the impact to homeowners and businesses. I know these property tax increases are painful to some, but I also know the values that we hold in this community. I know the quality of life that we desire in the city of St. Paul, and I know that we all want a brighter future for our families and our children. The budget I present today preserves that bright future for generations to come. As I close, I know that some of you might have been thinking that I haven't mentioned light rail yet. I couldn't go without saying something about light rail. But I don't really have to say that much. Evidence of progress is all around us. Tracks are being laid in the street. Stations are popping up out of the ground. Pavement and sidewalks are appearing, giving us a glimpse of what the completed Central Corridor will look like. But like the corridor, there's been a lot of work happening across the city of St. Paul, and much progress has been made. But the job is not done. And just as we could never stop the construction of the corridor until the work is completed and the trains are running, we cannot stop rebuilding St. Paul until the full potential of our city is recognized. Today we gather at a new chapter of St. Paul, where soon the sound of hammers will give way to the sound of great music. Our work is not done, and sometimes progress is difficult. But let us stop to celebrate these important milestones. Let us celebrate the progress, and let us continue to build the city and move it into the future for a strong and many generations to come. It's a great city. Let's keep on building it. Thank you very much.